It's a dark and stormy night here at Pod People headquarters, and it seems like a good time to do some mad science, don't you think, boys? 'Cause we are America's youngest podcast, the Pod People. This is a nice boy. This is a good boy. A mother's angel. Matisse Van Rossum.
I'm Abby Normal? No, I read that label wrong. I'm sorry. I'm Ben Sheets.
And I'm Cleveland Mosier, and I don't know about you guys, but I kind of fancy a roll in the hay.
Ooh. Well, this week we are taking it back to the year 1974 to talk about Mel Brooks' classic comedy spectacular, or spooktacular, you could say, Young Frankenstein. Young Frankenstein,
It's
however you
pronounced
wanted.
Frankenstein.
Of course, starring Gene Wilder, Madeline Kahn, Marty Feldman, Peter Boyle, Cloris Leachman, Terry Garr, and Kenneth Mars. Usually I don't list that many of the stars, but they're all so important in this movie. I think that
Everyone deserves a listing.
deserves it. Yeah, and it's the story of the grandson of Victor Frankenstein trying to repeat his grandfather's legacy and return life to the dead. Cleveland, this was your pick. Tell us about Young Frankenstein.
Well, I mean, honestly, you summarized it well. Apart from that, I think just cherry picking fun scenes is really all I had in mind for this episode.
Well, why did you pick it? What significance does this film have for you?
I grew up watching this movie. I had it on VHS and would just run it back to back. I can still quote pretty much the entire film I found after not watching it for pretty good, 5 years or so. Still,
It's very quotable.
it's extremely
Yes.
quotable, pretty much every line. And yeah, it's just always been a treasure to me. I saw it before I saw the original. I grew up watching Mel Brooks movies, and I'm always happy to talk about something upbeat on the podcast. Of course, I'm always happy to talk about something macabre, legitimately macabre and dark and morbid as well. But horror is not hasn't always been my identifying genre. My personal
we forced
calling
it
card.
upon you.
And I think that allows me to bring a different perspective to the podcast. But I also like to bring in something outside of horror every once in a while.
Well, I
whenever
appreciate
I can.
I appreciate that too, because while I do enjoy comedy a lot, I have a hard time talking about comedy. For me, it's harder to analyze than drama or horror or something else, because so much of what I enjoy about comedy is just like, that bit was funny. Ha 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 ha.
Well,
that
and
bit was funny too.
It's funny how
Ha, ha, ha.
explaining a joke makes it much less funny.
Right.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend watching the film before we just ruin all the jokes for you. Definitely, if you haven't seen it. But for me, what I'll say about that in comedy is, well, my first published work was Castle Battles, and that's a comedy game. I have a pretty deep love of the genre, and will often seek it out before horror even. I love comedy, and I've even done a little improv at the Pit in New York on a guest night. And by that I mean I was picked out of random from the crowd for 2 minutes, so it's not actually a brag. But I do love the scene, and hold on, no, redact that. I don't love the scene. I
was gonna say,
experienced
improv
it
comedy-
briefly for a moment and thought it
Improv
was
comedy
fun.
is like the lowest form of comedy.
Riffs, on the other hand, is the highest form
Yes.
of comedy.
And the line that separates those two is razor thin.
Yeah, I think that there can be very good improv that breaks out of the genre, and some of the best moments in cinema were improv.
Well, there's a difference between improv and ad-libbing. Saying something funny that strikes you on the spot. There's a lot of that in this movie. A lot of the best bits are actually ad-libbed. But improv comedy is it has a formula, I think, that people are trying to follow, the yes and thing. I think that's different than just saying something funny at the end of a line and seeing if it sticks.
So it is. I think the big problem with that improv faces is that bad improv is particularly bad.
Yes.
It is. It is designed to be cringy at that point. When improv is not good, it is uncomfortable and stomach churning in only bad ways. So I think that is probably the biggest aspect that has a saying like it's the worst form of comedy, but when it's good, like it's great. Like
Good
and it's really
good
fun.
ad libs, good. Like I said, there's a lot of good ad libs in this movie.
Yeah, and like it's an art. It's an art. And it's a difficult one. But anyway, I do love it, and I love comedy in general. I find that comedy and horror are very similar. The mechanism of fear and laughter, I think, is built up the same way. It's just that the punchline is often different, and that sort of separates the two. Both require a realization, like a setup and a realization. Horror can often be a subversion of comedy, and vice versa. I think that you kind of need both of them, and they coexist very well.
Well, what's the saying? Comedy is just a combination of tragedy and timing. Is that how
Something
that
like
saying
that.
goes?
You know, and I think that's a really good point you make. I think they are very similar, especially in that they're both participatory genres. You know,
Oh, well
they
said.
both beg for either laughter from the audience or fright from the audience. And a lot of times in sections of both genres, you know, if they don't elicit those responses, they are kind of a failure. You know, and I won't say every movie that fails to be scary or fails to make you laugh is a bad horror or bad comedy, but I think in the most broad sense, those are usually the aims.
And then you have the unintentional comedies.
Yes.
The ones that are not supposed to be funny,
Yes.
but are extremely funny. Yeah, well said. I agree.
Actually, I think that's why bad horror is so funny.
Expound upon that.
Well, I mean, it's that simple idea. Like when the execution flops, it becomes funny again. When something is supposed to be horrifying and ends up being a dud, there could be something really funny in that.
Yeah, and
Like old monster movies
what's
and such.
interesting
Or
is
like The Evil Within.
yeah, what's interesting is I
Yes.
find bad horror much more engaging and entertaining than bad comedy.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
I don't know why. Maybe you guys have some ideas on that.
Because bad horror is still comedy. Bad comedy isn't horror. It's just
Bad
it's just-
comedy is embarrassing.
yeah, exactly, and it just becomes cringy.
Maybe it's that kind of improv thing where, like, improv, you know, it's inherently off the rails because there's no guide. So if it's bad, it just seems like a mess. Bad horror, you know, at least you can laugh at the ineptitude because they're not trying as
Right.
hard to make you laugh.
It's because they're trying to scare you, but how badly they're failing makes you laugh. But with comedy, they're trying to make you laugh, but how badly they fail just makes you uncomfortable or irritated. Like I can get really, really mad at like bad comedies.
Same.
Because like, there's nothing worse than a film that smugly thinks it's making good jokes, but they don't land.
Well, and yeah, that's part of it. Like whether it's improv or not, like if a joke doesn't land, like, and if it's like a written joke, like if it's crafted
Right.
and it doesn't land, it's just dumb. You know, it's poorly written. Whereas like horror, when it's poorly written, is funny, or can be at least. You know, it gives you agency over the fear when it's not fearful anymore, and there's laughter in that. Whereas it not being funny isn't scary. It's
just frustrating.
yeah, it's just idiocy. And I love dumb comedy, but done well, because that's an art too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that this movie has a lot of dumb comedy in it that is still very funny.
Physical comedy.
And I don't think that,
Yeah.
we've been talking about like what makes bad horror and bad comedy, and I think this film is a great example of how to do those things right, because this movie is not bad.
Physical comedy
Yes.
can be one of the hardest also to master, because it requires like such grace and strength as an actor. Like it's ballet. Like you're doing a full on physical performance. So there's a lot to be said for that.
In the same way that being a stuntman is like, yeah, but it does have more than just like a vocal delivery involved. I haven't seen this movie since I was a kid, like probably 10 or so, and I was surprised how much of it I still found legitimately funny.
It's fucking hilarious.
Yeah, it's great.
Just because like slapstick is so tropey, and like this movie is so quoted and is so part of the like comedy horror culture. You know, it's one of the most famous comedy horror movies of all time, and I still laughed a lot. Even the same old bits that I knew to expect are still really funny.
Okay, here's why Mel Brooks's films last as well comedically as they do. We can get into or not get into some of the more like problematic elements of Mel Brooks from like a dumb modern perspective, but like
What's the point?
No,
Yeah.
I don't want to. But one of the reasons I think his comedy is still so effective today is nearly all of his films are genre pieces. They all play off of something that is like already from a different iconic time.
They're spoofing things pretty much always.
Right,
yeah.
whether it's Star Wars, Frankenstein, Sherlock Holmes, Robin Hood, etc. These are all already things that are iconic and known. So they're never dated. They're always things that people will be familiar with till the end of time. So these films will always last. And I love that. I absolutely adore that about them. Now, that being said, like, I think that that's not a necessary qualifier, but it definitely helps.
And I think on top of that, Mel Brooks clearly has such a love for the genres he's spoofing, especially when it comes to this movie and 30s and 40s horror, Frankenstein,
all of
and the
Universal
likes.
Frankenstein movies, yeah.
And it's so clear in terms of the style of this movie, the sets, the editing. It's so clear that he has such a respect for the genre that I think it makes things funnier. And on top of that, in terms of timelessness, I think a big part of it is because slapstick comedy is so universal. You don't have to have a deep cultural knowledge to find slapstick funny.
People falling over and breaking things will always be funny.
It's Punch and Judy shows. Like it is the most accessible for children as well.
Well, you mentioned like how well this film like achieves the aesthetic of the films that it's like satirizing. They did actually have a lot of the same props of the Frankenstein, the Universal Frankenstein.
They say so in the credits, which is really neat.
And I looked that up.
Oh, good. I'm glad you did.
Yeah. So apparently the guy who built all that stuff was a dude named Ken Strickfaden, who did not actually get credited in any of the original Universal Frankenstein movies for all of that cool electrical lab equipment he built, and he just had it all sitting in his garage. When they were in pre-production for this movie, Mel Brooks like found out that dude was still alive, and he went to him and he was like, "Hey, I'm making a spoof of Frankenstein. Can I use these props? I'll credit you in the film like you didn't get for Frankenstein." And Strickfaden was like, "Yeah, sure. Totally."
Awesome.
So for like the whole lab set and everything, those are all the old original props from the James Whale films, which I think is a really fucking cool touch.
It really is. And I love the original Frankenstein too. I grew up watching those as well.
I've only seen the original and Bride. I've never seen the other couple that Universal did.
Yeah,
The
I've only
Frankenstein
seen
ones?
those two.
Oh, there's a bunch of them. Oh, yeah, there's like Stepson of Frankenstein and all kinds of shit. Like it goes on, but I mean mostly just like the iconic monster films, The Mummy, the original Mummy, Wolfman, of course, Bela Lugosi's Dracula. Like I adore those films, and I almost picked Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein instead of this film, and I might still one day, but
I'm really glad you did.
I'm gonna pace it out. I won't do it soon, but I might still pick that one at some point. And because I grew up loving that one too, because it features like Boris Karloff and a bunch of the others. I think.
I mean, there's nothing stopping you from doing.
It's got Bela Lugosi in it.
There's nothing stopping you from doing any of those early Universal monster movies over Abbott and Costello. The only one we've talked about is The Invisible Man.
Well,
you could do Frankenstein or Dracula or the Wolfman. It doesn't have to be Abbott and Costello.
And I will, and I'll probably be doing it before Abbott and Costello. But also, the panic in your voice gives me strength.
I am not the one who picked the Gracie Strangler.
Hey,
no, but it's still our best episode.
Don't take it out on me.
I love Abbott and Costello. I don't know.
So there could be something to that. But anyway, we've digressed on a fun tangent. But I love those films, and it really does capture that same spirit so well. You could hardly tell that it wasn't shot during.
Well, and the thing about bringing the original set pieces and props back from the 30s films is it doesn't seem like a huge deal at a first thought, but when you think about it, keeping those props for 40 years and having them in good condition for
Yeah.
a new movie.
I wouldn't be
is
surprised if they had to do a little bit of maintenance on them to touch them up, but still, yeah.
Still, like, you don't see that nowadays. You don't see them
Yeah.
pulling things from the 70s and 80s back in the same condition.
Well, it's crazy.
Oh yeah, they
It's-
used to do it all the time.
It's
too.
crazy that this guy Ken Strickfaden like just held on to them and just put him in his garage for 40 years. The fact that he owned the physical props, that Universal wasn't trying to be like, no, they're ours. You know, like that in itself, I think is.
Oh,
is
they didn't
really
give a shit back
interesting.
then. Like that's one of the fun things about like that
That's-
era
that is-
of like
that is
Hollywood
true. That is-
Hollywood magic. Like they gave no
They
shits.
were playing it really fast and loose back in those days.
I like to imagine it was partially out of spite because he wasn't credited.
Oh,
He was
yeah.
like, yeah, I'm going to take my phone and go home
that,
with it.
That was probably the argument that he used if they did present an argument over it. It's like, I made this shit. You didn't put my name in the credits. I'm taking it. It's mine. I built it.
Oh yeah, and like productions well up until today in some cases too can be a real mess.
Yes.
Like
Shit just goes
in that
missing.
respect. Yes, it does. As a matter of fact, my grandfather's tools disappeared on the set for what is it? The third Sign. What is it? What is that alien film? The
Signs?
No, not that one. The
Close Encounters of the
Third Kind. That's the one. Yeah, his toolkit went missing because they filmed it like nearby or some shit.
Oh.
Like, yeah.
And somebody just stole his tools. Wow.
I need to check it back with my family and confirm those facts, but fun little detail. But yeah, that sort of thing seems to happen all the time on film sets. But no, yeah, back in the day, they definitely played it fast and loose.
Well, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about Gene Wilder, who plays Frederick
huge
Frankenstein. I mean, also, I think part of the reason that so many Mel Brooks movies are so funny is the inclusion of Gene Wilder in several of them. You were saying, Cleveland, and I agree with you during this movie that Gene Wilder is maybe one of the greatest actors of all time.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely mentioned that right off the bat. Like, I think the credits might not have even finished rolling yet, and I had to bring it up.
I'm very much with you on that one.
All time.
Milwaukee's own Gene Wilder, maybe the best celebrity to ever come out of Milwaukee, and rest in peace. He died 4 years ago.
Yeah, what an absolute treasure. I mean, he's not even Mel Brooks films. He's just the gem of any movie he's in.
Oh yeah, he's fucking incredible. He's such a good comedic actor, both in like his delivery and his physicality. And I know that this was like a big passion project for him because it was from what I understand, it was pretty much his idea. He got Mel Brooks on, and I think that Gene Wilder wrote a lot of the script as well. So like this was really a passion project for him, and I think it shows.
He's definitely the heart of this movie, for sure.
I was also reading today that they had to do like upwards of 15 takes of a lot of lines because he couldn't stop laughing, so he kept ruining every take. And it took them 15 to 20 takes to get one where he has a fucking straight face.
But that energy just like really carries through. Like he has so much life in him. In this movie, I mean, he screams most of his lines.
Yes, well, the introductory scene to him teaching the class and being sort of grilled by one of his students about, whether he believes in his grandfather's research.
Are you really one of the relatives of Dr. Frankenstein? Yeah, that guy.
Yeah, and
beautifully obnoxious,
and gets in kind of an argument because Gene Wilder is just he doesn't want anything to do with that tomfoolery. He's a man of science, not superstition.
That scalpel to the leg.
When he stabs himself in the leg with a scalpel is one of my favorite bits. I don't even remember the line that he does it on. You might, Cleveland, since you've seen it so many times, but it's just like such perfect punctuation, and then the way that he kind of like just his eyes look down to it, and then he like crosses his legs to hide the scalpel.
He opens his hand and it stays there, and then closes, and that like the pacing of it is just like perfect. Like just the way like he stabs his leg on a punctuation, and then like looks down, opens his hand, and you see it for a second, like just stuck directly into his leg. Like it's like just really like masterful timing. You can they blocked that whole sequence out. You can see it. He was so good in that in all of his films. Even like in Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory, where he does the the limp with the cane at the beginning, and then it turns into like a roll, and he leaps out of it.
I know that was famously his idea. I think it was like he threatened to walk out if they wouldn't let him do that gag.
It was his stipulation, like whether he would do the film or not, like as if he could add that to the scene. It makes for like such funny shit, man.
I'm bad. There's a lot of Mel Brooks shit I haven't seen. Like I've never seen Blazing Saddles and shit like that. So, but I even from having seen Young Frankenstein as a kid, Gene Wilder's performance has really stuck with me.
I think HBO recently just put a big commentary warning on the front of Blazing Saddles, but no, we should watch it sometime, man.
Yeah.
Have y'all seen Spaceballs?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've seen Spaceballs.
Robin Hood Men in Tights.
No.
Oh, that movie is a gift.
I love The Producers.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Producers is one of my favorite of his.
Another fun fact about Gene Wilder, allegedly quite the bisexual. Represent.
Hey.
For sure.
He had beautiful hair.
Yeah. Yeah. There's someone recently on an interview who outed him and Richard Pryor for like getting up to hijinks on the sets for like one of their films or something, which is
They did
pretty funny
a
to me.
few movies together.
Yes, they did. And if you haven't seen any clips from them, like they're great. I forget. There's one with them in prison that is hilarious.
Stir Crazy.
Yes,
that one's
great.
Hear No Evil, See No Evil is pretty funny.
I haven't seen any of these movies. I'm much more of the horror connoisseur, clearly.
Just imagine Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor, like dream team,
match made in heaven,
comedy
right?
dream team, honestly.
Another thing I love about that first scene with Gene Wilder's character is when they bring in the old man to show like how you can suppress like nerve actions with like the band they wrap around his head or whatever, and Frankenstein kicks him in the balls and then leans over to his assistants like, give him an extra $1.
Yeah, that shit's still funny, man. That kind of like off the cuff witticisms are, I think, what Mel Brooks is really known for in his writing. And, it reminds me of a lot of modern comedy. And I think that's why it holds up so well, is because there's such a constant balance between like physical comedy, dumb goofball shit, and then like really well written jokes and some ad lib thrown in as well. Like you get so much of it and it's all like so machine gun fire. I think it matches the pacing of like any modern show like Archer or anything like that. Also worth noting other famous like Jewish comedians too that came like before Mel Brooks, like the Marx Brothers. There's a lot of like similarities and like those like Groucho Marx witticisms for me anyway hold up very well too. I was going back the other day and enjoying some of those movies again.
Shortly after we're introduced to Young Frankenstein.
Yeah, best we get back into the plot.
Yeah, he receives a letter or something to go to his grandfather's castle in the old country, and so he does. There's a really great scene with him saying goodbye to his girlfriend, Madeline Kahn is that actress.
I was surprised at how much of a sex comedy it becomes at times.
This movie is extremely horny.
It's pretty horny.
Yeah.
It was way hornier than I, obviously, because last time I saw it, I was a child, so I don't think I picked up on the horniness. But that scene where they're saying goodbye is so funny, where he like tries to kiss her, and she's like, "No, not on the lips. I have to go to such and such," and he like tries to like put his hand in her hair. She's like, "No, not the hair." And it's just
he goes for a coat. He's like, "Taffeta, darling, it's taffeta." Like, man, it's funny, when I was a kid, like, I'd fast forward the train station scene, and now it's one of the funniest to me.
It's so funny.
Yeah, it's so good.
Because it just keeps going on, and then they're just kind of, like, awkwardly, partially hugging, and it's just like, okay, bye. And then he gets on the train that goes all the way to Europe.
Oh, man.
And then, of course, he meets Marty Feldman, who plays Igor, which that bit is one of my favorites because, of course, he does the whole you're Frederick Frankenstein. He's like, no, it's Frankenstein. Or you must be Igor. It's pronounced Igor.
Oh, Frederick Frankenstein.
Frederick.
Dr. Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
You're putting me on.
No, it's pronounced Frankenstein.
Do you also say Froderick?
No. Frederick.
Well, why isn't it Froderick Frankenstein?
It isn't. It's Frederick Frankenstein.
I see.
You must be Igor.
No, it's pronounced Igor.
But they told me it was Igor.
Well, they were wrong then, weren't they?
Frederick Frankenstein.
He's so great in this. I love the perpetually moving hump that he has.
And every time somebody touches it, it makes a sound like they're hitting wood.
It's hollow, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, you know, I'm a great doctor. I could probably help you out with that hump. What hump?
No, like Marty Feldman is another absolute gem, and it is such a shame he died as young as he did.
Yeah,
just to think like what other films he could have
amazing.
been in and like been incredible in. But fortunately,
Outside of
thank God, like he's so iconic in this film. I think like he is sort of the poster boy for this movie.
Yes. In many ways. I mean, well, he's got an iconic look, first of all, but also he has so many of the best gags too. He's definitely, outside of Gene Wilder, my favorite performance. I saw some weird trivia that maybe this is well known and I just didn't know it, but apparently Steven Tyler wrote Walk This Way after seeing this movie from the Walk This Way. What?
I've heard that before.
Yeah, I didn't. Aerosmith was working on their new album and they went to see this movie in the theaters in '74. And Steven Tyler thought it was so funny that the next morning he got up and wrote Walk This Way.
So impressionable. I love it.
That's so fucking weird.
Yeah, that's bizarre.
Yeah, he has so many good bits in this film, and like just his facial expressions, just his face in general is just like beautiful and hilarious. Yeah, definitely well before his time. He died at 23.
At 23?
Like, well, okay.
How old was he in this movie?
Like pretty close. It's got to be like unless I'm calculating this wrong, because he was born born in 1959 and died in 82.
What?
Yeah. Unless
Wait. That would mean he's 15 in this movie.
No. Well, that's not right.
Yeah.
Well, hold on. Let's double check the Google.
He was born in 1934.
34.
Cleveland. He was born in 1934.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was his spouse's.
This very mature 15-year-old.
I was gonna say, like, he died at 23. How old was he?
Okay,
He looks
sorry,
like an old man.
I was looking at his spouse's. His spouse seemed to have died when she was 23, though.
Man, he was a cradle robber.
Yeah, no kidding.
But well,
Well, they died the same year. They both died in 82.
so 19. Would you 30? What was it?
1934.
Okay, 1934.
So he's like 30.
34 to 82. He was 48.
Okay, so
He was like 30 when they were shooting this
Yeah.
movie, though.
That checks out.
Yeah.
That checks out. Yeah.
Which
23 doesn't really check out for the film, but no, yeah. So glad
it would have been about
glad we caught that.
40.
it would, yeah.
He
So
was
yes,
about 40.
48.
Jesus Christ, what was that? Was
That was a journey right there.
I'm
going
gonna-
from thinking Marty Feldman was 15 in this movie to working his way back around. But what that does mean is that when he was filming this movie, his spouse was 15. So there's some weird shit going on there.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Stinky.
What have we done here? Moving on.
Let's just brush that under the carpet, and yeah.
Well, while we're talking about great characters, I want to talk about Kenneth Mars as Inspector Kemp, who is another one of my favorite characters, with his fake arm that he whacks around to move.
And his incoherent accent.
And my favorite touch about him is that he's wearing a monocle over his eye patch.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love how the fake arm gets perpetually stuck.
Yeah.
Like, that's one of my favorite bits, is it just gets stuck in different poses.
Yeah, it's just
almost.
like to crank. It's like on a crank, you know, and he has to like a gear change, like has to like keep shifting
talk
it.
about fucking physical comedy. The way he swats his arm around to get it into different positions is absolutely incredible.
Oh yeah. one of the things that works really well about his incoherent accent, the reason that joke still lands is because like the other like Eastern Europeans can't understand him either.
Right. Yeah, I love how like vague the setting for this is, because they say it's Transylvania, but like people are speaking German, but most of the villagers have
British accents, like Cockney accents,
and
at times.
nobody can understand Kemp because he's just, his accent is too thick.
It's essentially how Americans view Europe.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly it. It's just like one big kind of like incoherent hodgepodge.
I mean, see, that's why I love comedies. You can get away with stuff like that.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
and turn like something like that into a strength.
It's not mean-spirited, you know? There's
it's fucking hilarious.
There's nothing mean-spirited in anything in this movie.
That bit will always be one of my favorites. Like the incoherence gag is funny in pretty much everything, from like Dale and King of the Hill to like do you like Dags?
Boomhauer and King of the Hill.
Yeah, that's right. Boomhauer and King of the Hill. Thank you. And the do you like Dags scene in like Snatch as well. Like I love that, like that incoherence. Like,
well,
gag.
that's a really good point to bring up, because I think the part of this movie that had me laughing the hardest, and maybe all of us, was when Frankenstein tries to show that the monster is not evil to the town. So they do a performance of putting on the Ritz.
Yeah.
And just like the monster just incoherently bellowing his parts of the lines is so fucking funny, and I had completely forgotten about that entire bit.
If you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where fashion sits?
I don't know why it's so hilarious.
I mean, I can
It's
say,
the
but not on the
combination
podcast.
of earnestly dancing,
Yes.
and then when you expect something semi-normal, you get the exact opposite.
Yes.
You can see the homage to it in Shaun of the Dead. Also, when they do like that,
I haven't seen that movie in forever.
and then like the zombies wail in the background, like it's very, very similar to me.
Apparently,
Like zombie stupidity.
the whole putting on the Ritz thing was something that Gene Wilder demanded to have in the movie. It was his idea, and Mel Brooks didn't really like it, but let them do it because he said, well, if you believe this strongly in it, then it must be the right decision. And then once they were putting it together in editing, and he saw the combination of the bit with the audience just like yelling and applauding and shit, that's when Mel Brooks was like, okay, I get it. This is funny.
Yeah, it's the funniest bit in the movie.
It's my favorite part, for
See,
sure.
And that's the mark of any good director, I think, where like they're a team leader and they listen like to the other members of the team, you know, and like hear them out.
Someone who's able to say like, I don't agree, but I trust you as an artist enough that you know what you're doing that I support this.
Or at least to let them try it.
Right.
You know, and see. That whole idea of like being an auteur and like it just being your singular vision is so dumb. I think for that same reason.
Apparently, the original cut of this movie was over 3 hours long.
I'd watch it.
Well,
I'm glad it's not,
Mel
but-
Brooks and Gene Wilder wouldn't want you to, because they think that the version they cut it down to is much better. I'm pretty sure in some interview Gene Wilder said that for every joke we had that landed, there were 3 that didn't.
Whoa.
So I don't think I want to see the original.
Well, yeah,
cut.
it's
I
kind
think I'm
of
happy to have this
Out of
version.
curiosity, I definitely it would seem that like this cut needs to exist for a
it's
reason.
kind
but-
of the what we do in the shadows effect. You know, when you're ad-libbing and riffing so much, it
Yeah, that's
may
a great point.
seem like it's funny on set, but once you get into the edit bay and start
Yeah.
cutting things up, you quickly realize what is actually funny and what isn't. It's one of those things where I think having a lot of footage and coverage only helps this movie.
I think in combination with the fact that Mel Brooks and everybody were having so much fun filming this movie that he literally came up with new scenes out of his ass just to keep filming the movie. I think when you put those two tidbits together, some things start to make sense. It's like, oh yeah, well, it's probably the stuff you came up with on the fly to keep production going because you were having fun that probably didn't make take a lot of the cut, is what I would think. Yeah, the What We Do in the Shadows comparison is great. I had totally forgotten that they shot like 90 something hours, or they had like 90 hours of footage or something that they cut down. Crazy. See, that's what I'm saying, man. Comedy is hard. I do not envy people who make comedic things for a living. It's fucking hard.
Yeah, I think like so much of it comes down to like needing a writer's room. Like in comedy, like at least for like my own like thoughts on like comedy production and how to do it well. Like you gotta have a writer's room with a team who are comfortable just putting it out there and seeing if it lands or not, and then y'all just collectively deciding whether or not.
I don't think you can write comedy by yourself. That's way too masturbatory.
Oh,
you need
no.
one dude in a
no.
room laughing at his own jokes. Like that's a
You need
fuck
a
that.
relentless editor as well.
Also,
Yes.
Like, I
so
think
true.
a lot of people respect like Judd Apatow's movies, but the biggest problem I have with them are they're all like 2.5 hours long.
Yeah.
And they just scream, "I need an editor." And it's like, yeah, there's such an appreciation I have for tight comedies, you know, tightly crafted, funny throughout comedies.
Yeah.
It's an art form for sure.
I think it's harder, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's harder to do long form comedy, like comedy films, than to do like a television show. Like I think that's why sitcoms are successful, because there's something more manageable about like doing like a tight 20 minutes.
I'll tell you what a lot of it is. It's the live sets with sitcoms. One of the things that kept them going for so long.
They hardly do that shit anymore.
Anymore, no. But back in the day, like the live studio audience is how you could tell if a joke landed or not,
Right.
and whether you could keep it in. You had an immediate gauge right there, and that scraps the writer's room requirement.
And then you've got more modern comedy that still uses laugh tracks, even though they don't have a live studio audience. Yeah, that shit sucks.
Like if
shit sucks, man.
I am very okay with like laughter in the background if there's a live studio audience, but otherwise I'm not here for it.
I mean, we've famously seen all of those clips of The Big Bang Theory with the laugh track removed, which is already a heinously unfunny show, even with the laugh track. But then when you take the laugh track away completely, it's just
Well,
devastating.
again, like,
Disturbing.
that is like one of the key
it's
differences.
uncanny. It's uncanny. Yeah.
That can-
But I think
that
there's
can help a
still
lot.
like in modern comedy, in modern television comedy, there's a lot of really funny, very successful shows that do not utilize like laugh track or live studio audience.
Well, it's I think it is. You need one of the three. You need
What
a
We
good
Do in the
editor.
Shadows is good.
Yeah, you need-
Always Sunny.
Yeah, you either need a good editor, which I think also probably utilizes test audiences. You got to get other people looking at it. You have to put it out there and see if it lands or not. That's the joy of comedy clubs, stuff like that. Test your work, and I see like game development is very similar in this respect too. You need to test on other people, see if it works, see what lands, what sticks, and like hone that. And good editors can do that. And then, either that or a live studio audience or a writer's room, which is essentially the same thing but condensed.
I think one really important thing for comedy
Quality assurance.
films as well as comedy TV is a strong sense of world building. Strangely enough, I think if you have a fully fleshed out and built world for the actors to play in, the constraints can force more humor because they know the world they're riffing on more than just an anything goes mentality. For example, I think this movie does it fantastically with all of the period props and sets and costumes and stuff. I think because they're in those characters, they know what the characters are, and subverting expectations can be funny in those roles.
To build on that too, I think the subversion is really important, because with like world building and comedy, I think it's often funniest when it intentionally breaks its own world building. Mel Brooks loves to do that, whether it is like when the fight scene like breaks into the other studio set in Blazing Saddles, or like when the boom mic drops in Arrested Development. Like there are like so many funny moments in comedy in general as well, where you intentionally break your own world building. You break the fourth wall.
I think you're definitely right, Ben, that especially for like satire, having a kind of source material to satirize does a lot of the world building for you, and I think makes it way easier, because like they had, for something like this, they had a really deep well to pull from like the Universal monster movies of the 20s and 30s. Like there's so much material, so much of it was tropey, and it's like, okay, well, how do we hyper exaggerate these tropes and stuff?
And I think a great comparison is you look at this versus something like Meet the Spartans, let's say. Or a superhero movie, or one of those Friedberg and Seltzer comedies.
That was such an interesting period
where
of film history.
Where it's just a hodgepodge of throwing everything at the wall.
It's not satire, it's references.
Yeah, satire, the important thing with it is a respect for what you're satirizing and what you're riffing on, essentially.
Or if not a respect, an understanding. Yeah, exactly. Because you can totally, like, political satire, like, you satirize people you don't respect. But yeah, you have to understand it. And that's such a good point. Like, those like epic movie and superhero movies and all of those things, they're not actually... You know, I think the first couple of Scary movies were satire, kind of lazy, dumb satire.
Yeah, there's still something for you to key into.
I credit that to the Wayans brothers.
Here's the thing about it, right? Whether like you call it like world building or you just call it like texture and grip. You know, like it's why concept is so important in comedy too. Like you can base an entire like 12-year running like sitcom just around like a simple premise. The world building is very important. Like even if it's like modern setting, and it's why like that idea of like, oh yeah, a cat and a dog having to live together in an apartment is funny. You can write that till the end of time, because you have some sort of textural grip, and it's enough for like people watching to latch on to listen, and then for you to subvert them. That's the whole idea.
Also, pop culture satires very rarely remain funny.
And again, I think the reason it works here is because it's mostly slapstick.
Yes.
You know, it is a spoof, but it's not just riffing on references to old things.
And it's satirizing something from sort of like a bygone era. So it's not
it's iconic, like I was mentioning earlier.
Yeah, it's not like it's taking what would have been current trends or pop culture and making jokes about it. It's like taking something iconic, like you say, Cleveland, and doing that. I think that oddly, I would say that maybe South Park is one of the only enduring pop culture satires in a weird way.
Well, that's because like they can put them out so fast, they can constantly be relevant.
But I mean, even like going back and watching like old episodes from 20 years ago that are still funny, even though they're like very specifically centered around things that were happening then. That's a whole different thing, and I think there's a lot to dive into there.
I'd be curious to see like how like future generations feel about South Park, because it's hard, because like we have that nostalgia factor, so it's hard for me to say.
This is true.
I'd still be happy to go back and watch some of it, and I have.
I do all the time, funny, and it's all still funny. But
yeah, but I wonder how much of that is nostalgia factor for me, as opposed to just like standing power. But I'd say that like while a great portion of this movie is physical comedy, I think that like most of its riffs and like its one-liners still like stand as well. Mostly too because like you can tell like there's a sense of awareness about dating themselves. Like Mel Brooks is usually pretty good about that. Some of his stuff can be, you get the occasional dated joke that might not land like so many generations on, but
but there's not.
It's there and it's gone so fast, because like there's always something to be like engaged.
It's not heavily laden with pop cultural references, or
it's just like good funny gags.
Yeah.
The Gene Hackman cameo as the blind hermit when the monster goes to him, and he just wants company, but he keeps hurting the monster, dumping soup in his lap, setting him on fire, and then when he's on his way out the door, like, where are you going? I was gonna make espresso.
Or like when they see the decayed heads, and it's like this head is like
been dead for this
30
long.
years, 10 years, 3 days. Fresh head, and it's just Igor behind the counter. Like, and then he starts singing "I've Got No Body and Nobody's Got Me." You don't have to know the song to find that fucking hilarious. Like, there are several tiers of comedy in that. That's how you do like it's something that could be dated now, right? The song is dated. Who gives a shit? It's still funny, and that's how you do it. Like, that's a primo like reference joke. They can still be good later on.
We've spent a lot of this episode talking just about the nature of comedy and what makes something funny, so not quite where I expected to go, but good shit. Do y'all have anything?
I have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
Were there any jokes in this movie that you felt like didn't age well? whether it's just because of its age or because things culturally have shifted. Personally, I don't give a shit. I think it's funny regardless. I think if you had a stick up your butt, I could see you getting upset about
I know where you're going with this. I was gonna bring it up.
the kind of forcing the monster forcing himself onto
Madeline Kahn's character.
Yeah.
I'd thought about this. And like at the beginning of the scene, I was like, uh-oh, how's this aged? And by the end of it, I felt like it's okay largely only because her character is okay with it by the end. Do you know what I mean? It could be problematic, you know? Like it could be like
I feel like this was a trap. The way Ben's looking, I feel like this is a trap.
trigger warning. It could have been somewhat rapey, but I think that like it's played off well enough that like I personally didn't have any problems with it, but like I don't know. As a matter of fact, I thought that like the end result of that scene is fucking hilarious. That like Frankenstein's dick or the monster's dick is so big that it gave her white hair. The
Bride of Frankenstein,
hair. That's fucking hilarious.
And
I never got that when I was a youth, and that's so funny.
And then his girlfriend leaves him for his monster. I think that's funny, I think.
And she gets upset when they only do it like 7 or 8 times in a row or something like that.
Oh yeah, them just like lying in the hay, just like both smoking cigarettes to see Frankenstein's
the
monster
cigarettes
smoking
after
a
sex
cigarette.
gag is so funny. Like,
They'll never not be funny.
Yeah, like and they do it like several times throughout, but all like the Roland Z. Hay jokes and like the monster must have an enormous shtuka is like so goddamn
Or
funny.
Madame blew her, and then there's just a horse noise.
Madame Blucher. Yeah, every time fucking Cloris Leachman. Every time somebody says her name, the horse is just whinny in the background.
That's called a callback, and it's a good one.
If we're still talking about funny bits, when
Always.
they're bringing the cadaver back to the castle, and the cart breaks and the arm falls out, and so Frankenstein like puts his arm over it to make it look like that it's his arm, and the constable comes along and he's like shaking his hand with the dead arm. He's like, "Oh, you're ice cold." It's like, "Yes, a nice warm fire will do me well." Time to rate, boys?
I think so.
Yeah.
Cleveland, why don't you go first?
Oh, 5. It's an easy 5 for me. I have no flaws with this film. It's a treat. It's a delight. God, it holds up so well. Easy 5.
Yeah, I think this movie's great. It's a lot of fun. Almost all of the bits land. It is standing the test of time very well. And Mel Brooks is a master of comedy and his craft, and so is Gene Wilder. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. I think it's definitely worth checking out.
I'm gonna go with Ben on this one. I think it's still really funny. A lot of the jokes still hit really hard. I was laughing a lot more than I expected. I'm not as well versed in like Mel Brooks stuff, and I don't have a ton of nostalgia, so I don't feel comfortable giving it a perfect score. But it's gonna be a 4 for me as well, which will give Young Frankenstein an average of 4.3 out of 5 pods. Nice to do a comedy film on the show every now and then. Next week, we're doing a not comedic film. We'll talk about it. We are gonna have a guest on the show next week, Joe Shea, returning from our episode on A Quiet Place years ago, and we're gonna be talking about The Guest, which is a film that I really like, and I am super excited to see and talk about again.
I hear good things. I want to see it.
It's great. I'm really excited to hear some of Joe's thoughts on that. It'll be really good to have him back on the show. Cleveland, who's given us money this week?
Oh, fuck. Right. Yep. This week is brought to you by Damien Brain. Get your brain out the drain. Yep. Fuck. God damn it. I should have had something prepared. I was talking about improv like leading up this whole time, and then I just like Get this fucking Damien Brain.
I thought that was
It's
fantastic.
okay. Much.
See, that's why you need an editor like that right there. Like,
Oh, see, I was gonna say the other reason. It's your failure that is funny.
Yes.
So it's just like a good bad horror movie.
it is why I don't plan.
Your failure is what makes it funny.
Good. You'll get your Damien Brain.
I'm on my way to get some brain from Damien Brain's brain drain.
Gang.
Suck so good that the brain is drained.
Drained.
Yeah, there you go.
Sucks so good that the brain is drained. I like that. There we go. Excellent.
All right. Well,
Good job.
it wouldn't be right if we didn't end it on a horny note, huh? Well, if you like the show, hit the 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, leave us a nice review, share an episode with the friends and the fam, or, you know, whoever. You can also follow us on Twitter at PodPeoplePod and at letterboxd.com/PodPeoplePod, where you'll find a list of all the films we've talked about on the show with our average ratings and links to those episodes. I'm on Twitter at Deep State Ozzy.
I'm on Twitter at Mr. Sheets.
And I'm occasionally tweeting for Light Arc Studio as we further progress on It Stares Back. I actually tweeted today, so there you go.
Oh, right.
I do tweet sometimes, I swear to God. And I'm trying to tweet a little bit more, trying to get back into the scene. So, yeah, if you want to see me stumble along as I tweet more fun indie development stuff on our game, It Stares Back, tune on in. And if you want to see some more spooky, creepy art, check out my work on ArtStation, or also you can check out some of my work on the Dread Collection Volume 2 as that continues to be advertised and put out soon.
It's out by now.
It's out by now? Excellent. Okay, yeah. So yeah, go check out the Dread Collection Volume 2 as well, because I'm pretty proud of how cool that game is. There's some really cool devs who worked on it. I just did some art. That's all.
Yeah, if you like indie stuff and horror stuff, definitely check out what the folks over there are doing.
Yeah, Dread XP. They're kicking ass and taking names.
Can definitely second that. All right, well, thanks for listening, and until next time, keep your brain from being
Drained.
abnormal. Bye.
Nothing, I tell you. 5, 6, 7, 8. For God's sake, come on. Are you trying to make me look like a fool? Please, I beg you. For safety's sake, don't humiliate him.